Let's start. There's one story that's dominating the papers this morning, as you can imagine. HS2. Sunday Telegraph goes with axe looms over HS2, over 8 billion cost shock. The bill has gone up by another 8 billion. Can you believe it? The Sunday Times goes with Sunak revives plan to slash inheritance tax. This has been waiting in the wings, hasn't it? And it seems to be a kind of pseudo confirmation that that's the direction of travel for the Prime Minister, clearly with a key eye on the next general election. The Observer goes with Sunak pushes to axe HS2 link ahead of Tory conference. I'm going to be discussing that in just a minute because they're axing the link to Manchester and the conference is in Manchester. The Mail on Sunday goes with Rishi will not axe triple lock on pensions, and there's an interesting commentary inside suggesting that if he did axe it, it would be political suicide. The Sunday Express, PM takes fight to Starmer. And then the Sun on Sunday goes with Strictly Haunted, a story about potentially the Strictly studio that my colleague Angela Rippon is currently dancing in, being haunted by ghosts, would you believe? And then the Sunday Mirror's got an interview with Boris Johnson and Carrie Johnson's former nanny, saying Carrie sacked me for boozing with Boris. Quite an interesting story about how she was sacked after she had a glass of rosé with the former Prime Minister. Now let's bring in David Maddox, the Express's online political editor, former colleague of mine at Express Towers. David, lovely to see you this morning. Let's go with your Sunday Express front page because it kind of sums it all up. This idea that I felt that when Rishi Sunak performed this climate climb down last week, he was sounding the gun on the next general election. Is that your feeling? Where are we going, do you think?
I think that that was everything that it was about, actually. And I'm not sure it was a climb down on his part. I think he was always a bit more sceptical than people gave him credit for. It was very much a Boris Johnson policy that he was climbing down.
Influenced maybe by his wife and their friend, Lord Goldsmith.
But when he did that, I saw some of the Conservative WhatsApp groups. The chat was May election. We're in this time. I think the Sun on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was going to be autumn. What is the argument in favour of a May election then, David?
So by doing the net zero thing he did, he's picking the fight for the election. You maximise that in the next 6 months, essentially. But the problem he has with waiting to the autumn is that the small boats will start coming over in large numbers again. He will lose a lot of the credit he's had on the net zero side. Of course, we've now got the inheritance tax.
Yeah, do you think they'll do this then? So the Sunday Times saying that they've revived this idea. It doesn't actually affect that many people, and Labour could attack it as a policy to make the rich more money.
This is about getting the Conservative base back.
Yeah.
If you look at the breakdowns of opinion polls, it's Conservative supporters who've left the party, who are not voting, who are sitting on their hands. This is a red meat for them to say, come back to us, come and vote for us again.
And then, of course, there's also been talk about this situation with regard to HS2. Let's move on to that now. I mean, all of the signs are pointing to at least part of this project not going ahead in the north, which is problematic from a political perspective because they talk about levelling up. He's going to Manchester for the Tory party conference next weekend. This show will be there, by the way. We're going to be reporting live from Manchester. And yet, at the same time, northern voters will be wondering why on earth they want to support a party that seems to have cast them adrift from a rail perspective.
Well, I mean, the real scandal, I think, came a couple of years back when they cancelled Northern Powerhouse Rail, which was much more necessary. What's the point of HS2?
I've no idea.
If it's not going to Euston, it's not going to Manchester. I remember the days when we were talking about it going to Edinburgh and Glasgow, you know.
Yes.
It's apparently, according to the Mail, going to be slower now to Manchester.
They've got this fascinating graphic in the Mail talking about how, because now it's not coming into Euston, but it's ending at Old Oak Common, which is near Acton in West London, because you have to get to Acton to get on the high-speed rail, it's actually just quicker to go on a slower line from London to Birmingham. Yeah. Also, I never really understood what was the priority of London to Birmingham. There were already good links there. What about Manchester to Leeds? What about Manchester to Newcastle? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, Dave.
None of it makes any sense. It never did make any sense. And, you know, the sadness about this is that lives have been ruined.
Yeah.
People have been kicked out of their houses. You know, ancient woodlands have been destroyed.
But if they axe part of it now, or can they axe it completely when the tunnels have already been drilled? I mean, it seems to me that they're not going to win either way, because if they axe it, they look weak, and everyone's going to be asking, you've spent 100 billion of taxpayers' cash on this, and you're now axing it. And if they keep on going with it, it's still a white elephant because people are working remotely. It's slower than conventional lines, and it doesn't cover the north.
It's a black hole where money was always going to disappear down, and maybe they're right now to pull the plug on it. I mean, I think the strikes, frankly, have a part to play in this. The fact that the strikes have stopped people going back to rail after the pandemic, and what's the point of investing?
Wouldn't Labour be in a better position if they supported axing HS2? I mean, I appreciate they can't do that because of their union paymasters who are representing people who are going to work on these projects for years to come. But there isn't the clear blue water that Rishi Sunak wants on this issue. I noticed that Starmer hasn't really said anything about the net zero. I'm getting the impression the government wants a fight. It wants to take the fight to Labour. People are saying, oh, they're indistinguishable. We don't know the difference between Starmer and Sunak. So he's saying all of these quite right-wing things, throwing the red meat. But yet Starmer's not taking the bait on any of this, is he?
Well, Starmer's being advised by Lord Mandelson.
Right.
And via Tony Blair
the
as well.
The former master of the dark arts.
Exactly. And the whole strategy is to say as little as possible, to stay under the radar as possible, because every time he does actually come out with a policy, as he did with the migration the other week, it falls apart at the first touch. And we kind of see Labour unmasked.
So it's the silent assassin approach continues,
exactly.
Dave. Yellow fever. We've got the Liberal Democrats, their conferences in Bournemouth. We've got Ed Davey in The Observer saying, I'll take the fight to the Tories. Will he?
Do you know, I think the polls are underestimating the impact of the Lib Dem vote.
Really?
We keep on seeing them around 8 to 10%. We say, oh, the Lib Dems are finished. They're nothing like, when Nick Clegg got to being Deputy Prime Minister and things. No, that's true to a certain extent, but there are swathes of Conservative seats. Because of the way Lib Dem votes split around the country, it's not even.
Yes.
It's very strong in certain areas. So the South West, Hampshire, Surrey...
The so-called blue wall, basically, which Davey's saying he'll smash through.
Yeah.
Although I'm going to ask Wendy Chamberlain this later. She's the Liberal Democrat Chief Whip. This confusion over where they are on the EU got Layla Moran, their own foreign affairs spokeswoman, saying we will rejoin, and Davey saying no, we won't. Where do you stand?
If you look at the wording of their policy, it is rejoin without admitting that they would rejoin.
Because I think there are some Conservatives who obviously back Brexit that might be disaffected with Rishi Sunak, but they're not going to be wanting to support a party that wants to take us back into Brussels, right? In general, it seems that voters are completely disillusioned with politics and politicians. Interesting polling in The Telegraph, where effectively a third of voters say that politicians are the worst ever, and also that they would like to see a new party or political figure to seize on the disillusion. Basically, we're saying that they're trumping for a Donald-like figure. Well, they had that with Boris Johnson, and it all went wrong.
Yes, they did, but there are other people out there. There are other options out there.
Who are you thinking about?
Well,
somebody that might be close to this channel.
Maybe a Mr. Farage and...
I know, but we keep on grilling Nigel on this, and he's like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to step back into the fray.
I think the issue there is, I don't think Reform UK is the right platform.
Yeah.
If there was a new Conservative party on the right, and it would need to be a new Conservative party, then I think that
Led
would
by
pose...
whom, though?
Well, somebody like Nigel, maybe somebody like Priti Patel, somebody on the right of Conservatives, then there would be a chance.
I mean, Sunak clearly recognises this because he has, this week...
This comes back down to a reason for the May election.
Is he more right-wing than he makes out? I say that because we've had Lord Ashcroft's biography in the week come out basically saying he's a Thatcherite at heart. He's just been stymied by Boris Johnson's excessive public spending and some of these green levies that he never supported. He is, quotes, not a hair shirt green, he said.
Yeah, well, I'm actually quoted in that book.
Are you, David?
Yeah, on the Brexit issue, because he was always said that he's not a real Brexiteer. And the first time I met him was on the day he told David Cameron to get stuffed because he was going to support Leave. And I knew Rishi quite well when he was a backbencher, and he always struck me as being a Thatcherite and a Brexiteer. Yeah. And maybe...
He keeps it well disguised at times,
he does,
doesn't he?
Yeah, I think it's been disappointing to a certain degree.
Maybe we're going to see a bit more after the net zero climb down of him unleashing his inner Maggie. Just a final word on this interview with Jenny Harries in The Telegraph. which incensed us both slightly in the green room. We'll behave more like Sweden when the next pandemic hits, says Jenny Harries, who was basically to Chris Whitty's sort of number 2.
Yes.
Sorry? Hang on a minute. Weren't newspapers like yours and mine and commentators like you and me saying throughout the entire escapade that we should be more like Sweden and getting shot down by people for apparently wanting OAPs to be killed in their droves? Now she says this.
I trawled through that article looking for an apology. I didn't see one. I think they managed to drag out the admission that they would follow the more liberal approach that Sweden took. I mean, I remember being in the Zoom meetings with you.
I know, little Zoom meetings with Carl Hennigan and Robert Dingwall and people saying, hang on, has anyone considered the effect on children's mental health of closing down schools? We reported this stuff. We got absolutely trashed on Twitter. Turns out we might have been right, folks. Who'd have thought it? Anyway, David, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Lovely, lovely to see you.